Dracaris. 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 Before I could start working on the horns, I wanted to make a head mannequin that matched my own size to use as a support. I began by cutting out all the pieces, and there were a lot of them. Once I cleaned up the mess and packed the foam away, I laid out the parts only to realize one was missing. So I went back and cut the missing part. When that was done came the gluing. I applied glue to all the edges and waited for it to dry. And then finally, the fun part, assembling the whole thing like a jigsaw puzzle. The headpiece is done and it's too big. Why am I not surprised? The next day, I did a second head, and this time I measured my own head properly to make sure the mannequin would fit. With that sorted, I could move on to the horns. For those, I reused the same pattern I had used years ago for a small dragon skull, just scaled it up. Same process as the head, cut the pieces, glue them together, repeat the ritual. Here is the look that I think I would go for. I wanted to have 6 horns, I have 8. I'm so happy. Now that I had decided how I wanted the horns to be positioned, it was time to sand them and glue them together. For the base, I used 2 very thin headbands that I glued together, and to create a surface for attaching the horns, I sewed a strip of felt between them. Once the base was ready, I moved on to cutting and positioning the horns, carefully placing each one where it needed to go. You really need to trust the process when you do something like that, because it looks so ridiculous right now. I continued the process until all 8 horns were securely attached to the headband. Once I was happy with the placement, I filled in the gaps using foam clay. I sculpted the clay with sculpting tools, then added extra details using a soldering iron to give the horns more texture. After everything had dried, I applied 3 layers of primer to prepare the surface. Then came the painting. First, a black spray painted base coat, followed by layers of gold to bring the whole piece to life. Here we are. The dragon has its horns. So the costume, as it is done. I still want to have a wand, so we'll see if I'm able to make it the way I want. If not, the costume as it is nice. And I really love having a wand, but having both hands free can be very handy. But before making the wand, I wanted to create the dragon skull. I went big for the dragon skull. The original pattern was meant for a 30 centimeters dragon, but I scaled it up by 300%, which meant that my dragon would be a massive 1.2 meters long. That also meant I was going to need a lot of foam. By now, you know the drill. First step, press the pattern pieces onto the foam. For that, I used 2 150 by 45 centimeters rolls. Then came the cutting. I always enjoy watching the pile of excess foam grow as I make my way through the rolls. There is something really satisfying about it. Once everything was cut, it was time to start gluing. I began with the horns, partly because I wanted to compare them to the smaller skull I made years ago, and partly because they were the smallest pieces, so easier to handle. While gluing, I often had to use baking paper or a plastic pocket between the pieces to prevent the ends from sticking to each other as I worked my way down the shapes. The dragon is really, really big. One thing I regret is that I used 4 millimeters foam. I had bought 6 millimeters, but not enough, so I decided to buy more foam and I bought 4 millimeters. Why, would you ask? Well, because I like to make stupid choices. And I was thinking, I don't know, maybe like I could buy some more 6 millimeters and redo it. We'll see. What is she talking about? No, we are not going to do it again. Before gluing the two halves of the skull and the jaw together, I took the time to sand everything thoroughly and to apply quick seal to clean up the seams. While everything was drying, I switched gears and worked on my embroidery for a bit, a nice break from the foam dust.
And now, before the next show starts, let's enjoy an intermission. You've plenty of time, so visit the snack bar now. A tasty treat will double your enjoyment of the show.
Once the sealant had dried, I did a final round of sanding and then moved on to assembling the skull. Gluing the two large halves together was a real challenge. I had never worked with pieces this big before, and it was definitely tricky to handle. That thing is huge. It is so big. I regret so much using 4mm clay. They was so stupid. It was such a stupid mistake. Why didn't I buy just like 6mm? It would have held its shape better. I will complain some more about the wrong choice of foam, but first I need to glue the horns onto the skull and give that dragon some teeth. The foam clay is done, the teeth are done. I did less foam clay than I expected because I ran into another problem. Why have only one problem when you can have several, right? So even though the foam clay is very light, when I added the teeth, I realized that the nose of the skull started to bend down. God, you have no idea how much I hate myself for using 4mm foam instead of 8mm, for example. Like, oh boy. But the good thing about making mistake and learning the hard way is that you never make the same mistake again. From now on, when I will start a foam project, I will know for sure which kind of foam I'm supposed to use. And the nightmare continues with the painting. I applied 3 layers of primer as I always do to prevent the foam from absorbing the paint. And while the primer was drying, I went to the store to buy some white spray paint because I wanted to make it easy for me. Just spray paint everything, give the skull a base coat. That would be a lot faster and a lot easier than just like to paint everything with a brush. Unfortunately, the primer seemed completely useless this time, and as I spray painted the skull, I realized that the marks, like the pen marks and the sealant, were still visible. So I had to go back to the store, and this time I bought a big pot of white paint that I applied with a brush. I applied 3 layers for the marks to be completely covered. So once that base coat was done and dry, I applied a brown wash and then I lightly sanded the skull to give it a weathered look. Horns done, dragon skull done, now we need the wand. And that is the part that scares me the most. It might either be a lot of fun or a big headache. And I've had enough headaches. So please let it be fun. What I want to do is to add some kind of stand. And on the stand, I will sculpt, or try to, I will sculpt a dragon. I started by shaping the base with aluminum foil, then flattened some Fimo to form a clay sheet that I used to cover the structure. After the struggles I had with the skull, I really wanted the wand to be a simple, relaxing project, but unfortunately, things didn't start well, as some of my Fimo had gone crumbly and was nearly impossible to work with. I did my best to smooth out the clay sheet over the foil, though it wasn't perfect, but I wasn't too worried since I knew the dragon would cover most of it anyway. To add some details to the stand, I poured liquid clay into silicone molds and glued the cured shape onto the base with bake and bond before baking the whole piece. The first part of the wand is done, is baked. I should be moving on to the painting right now, but I decided that I did not want to work on it anymore. It is June now. I started the costume in January, so it's been 6 months. It's been dragging on for so long, and I'm done. Thank you for watching until the end. During the weekend, I will go for the first festival in that costume. I am really excited. And then next month, I will have the photo shoot. I will post the pictures on my social media and in the vlog videos. So don't forget to subscribe if you want to see that. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.